In a forgotten corner of a Nevada desert town, 9-year-old Senna Graves stood alone outside a roadside diner at dawn, clutching a worn backpack and watching the sunrise paint the highway gold. She had no family, no guardian, and no protection, only a fierce determination to make it to school alive. For 3 weeks, a group of older boys had been waiting for her on the route, their threats growing darker with each passing day. When a convoy of 30 Hell's Angels pulled into the diner's parking lot, engines rumbling like distant thunder, Senna saw something no one else did. Men who understood loyalty, men who kept promises, men who might listen to a child everyone else ignored. She walked straight to the one they called Rook, a towering figure with silver in his beard and scars that told stories, and spoke the words that would change both their lives. "Please, walk me to school." What happened next stunned the entire town. Rook didn't laugh. He didn't turn her away. Instead, he made a call that brought together bikers from 3 states, former Marines, a retired judge, and a nurse who'd lost her own daughter years before. What began as a simple escort transformed into an iron promise: Senna would never walk alone again. But when the truth about who was hunting her emerged, and why a 9-year-old orphan had become someone's target, the Hell's Angels realized this wasn't just about protection. It was about justice, redemption, and proving that family isn't defined by blood, but by the promises you keep when no one else is watching. This is the story of a girl who refused to be invisible, and the brotherhood that turned her quiet plea into a thunder that echoed across state lines. The sun hadn't cleared the horizon when Senna Graves pushed through the glass door of the Route 19 diner, her small frame barely casting a shadow in the pre-dawn light. At 9 years old, she carried herself like someone who'd learned early that the world didn't offer second chances to children without families. Her backpack, patched with duct tape and fraying at every seam, hung from shoulders too narrow for its weight. If you value stories about courage, loyalty, and promises that change lives, consider subscribing. We bring you Northern Confessions every week, tales of honor from the forgotten roads of America. She'd been living in the group home on Miller Street for 8 months, ever since the social worker with tired eyes had told her that her grandmother wasn't coming back from the hospital. The home wasn't cruel, just crowded. 17 kids in a house meant for 8, 2 overwhelmed staff members, and rules that everyone broke because no one had time to enforce them. Senna had learned to be invisible there, to take up as little space as possible, to never ask for help, because help rarely came. But invisibility only worked inside those walls. Outside, on the 2-mile walk to Riverside Elementary, she'd become very visible to 3 boys who waited for her each morning near the old water tower. They were older, maybe 15, maybe 16, and they'd started with words. Insults about her clothes, her shoes, the fact that no one cared if she showed up to school or not. Then the words became shoves, then threats. Yesterday, the tallest one, the one with dead eyes and a knife tucked in his belt, had whispered something that made her blood run cold. He'd told her exactly what they planned to do if she tried to walk past them again. He'd described it in detail, smiling the whole time. Senna hadn't slept. She'd lain awake in the group home's crowded bedroom, staring at the ceiling and doing the math that terrified children learn. There was no adult coming to save her, no police officer who'd believe her story over 3 boys from families with lawyers, no system designed to protect a girl who belonged to no one. She could skip school, but eventually the truancy officer would drag her back and the boys would be waiting. She could run, but she'd tried that. They were faster. So she'd formed a different plan, a desperate one, a plan that made no logical sense except for one simple fact. She had nothing left to lose. The diner was nearly empty at 5:47 a.m. A waitress with grey hair and kind eyes was refilling the coffee station. Two truck drivers occupied separate booths, hunched over eggs and toast. And in the back corner, visible through the window, the parking lot had just begun to fill with the deep rumble of approaching engines. Senna had heard them coming from half a mile away, that distinctive thunder of 30 motorcycles moving in formation, their chrome catching the first rays of sunlight like scattered diamonds on asphalt. She'd been watching from the bus stop across the street for 20 minutes, waiting for them to arrive. The Route 19 diner was a known stop for the club. Everyone in town knew they came through on the first Monday of every month, heading back from some run that people whispered about but never discussed openly. Hell's Angels. The patches on their leather cuts said so in bold letters, along with Nevada chapter markings and symbols Senna didn't understand. Most people crossed the street when they saw those patches. Parents pulled their children closer. Shop owners locked their doors. But Senna had done her research in the group home's ancient computer lab. She'd read the articles about the charity rides, the veteran support programs, the way members showed up when disasters hit and no one else would. She'd read about the code they lived by: loyalty, brotherhood, honor, words that sounded like fairy tales to most kids, but to Senna they sounded like the only possible solution. The bikers were dismounting now, stretching road-weary muscles and greeting each other with the casual familiarity of men who'd ridden together through storms, both literal and metaphorical. They were a mix of ages, some in their 30s with lean builds and sharp eyes, others in their 50s and 60s with grey beards and bodies that spoke of decades on the road. They wore leather and denim, boots that had seen 1,000 miles, and faces that revealed nothing to strangers. One man stood apart from the rest, not by distance but by presence. He was tall, 6'3" at least, with a build that suggested controlled power rather than aggression. His beard was more silver than black, cut close along his jaw. Scars marked his knuckles and ran up his forearms, the kind earned through years of hard living and harder choices. The patch on his cut identified him as Rook, and the way the other bikers deferred to him made it clear he was someone important. Vice president, maybe, or road captain. Senna watched him through the window as he removed his gloves and tucked them into his belt. His movements were deliberate, economical. No wasted motion, no unnecessary drama. When he turned toward the diner entrance, his eyes swept the parking lot with the automatic vigilance of someone trained to notice threats. Those eyes landed on Senna for just a second, a small girl standing alone outside a diner before dawn, backpack clutched like a shield, and then moved on. He didn't see her as important. She was just another kid in a town full of them. That was about to change. Senna took a breath that tasted like gasoline and morning dust. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it might bruise. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to go back to the group home and accept whatever fate waited for her on the walk to school. But she thought about the boy's dead eyes and his whispered threats, and she thought about her grandmother's last words to her in the hospital. Be brave, little bird. When the world says no, you find someone who says yes. She pushed through the diner door and walked straight toward the man called Rook as he entered. He was ordering coffee from the counter when she stepped directly into his path, forcing him to stop or step around her. Her voice came out steadier than she'd expected, clear and direct, despite the fear coursing through her veins. Please walk me to school. Rook stopped mid-sentence, his order for black coffee hanging unfinished in the air. The diner went silent, the kind of silence that happens when something unexpected breaks the normal rhythm of morning routine. The waitress froze with the coffee pot halfway to a cup. The truck drivers looked up from their meals. Even the distant clatter from the kitchen seemed to pause. For 3 full seconds, Rook simply stared at the girl in front of him. She barely came up to his chest, her face upturned with an expression that mixed defiance and desperation in equal measure. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, the kind that came from nights without sleep. Her clothes were clean but worn, jeans with patches on the knees and a jacket 2 sizes too big. The backpack she clutched looked like it had been through a war. But it was her eyes that caught him, brown and steady, refusing to blink or look away despite the obvious fear radiating from her small frame. This wasn't a child playing games or seeking attention. This was a child who'd made a calculated decision and was standing by it, regardless of the consequences. "Say that again," Rook said quietly. His voice was low, gravelly from years of road dust and cigarettes he'd quit a decade ago. Not threatening, but not welcoming either. Just waiting. Zena's fingers tightened on her backpack straps. "I need someone to walk me to school. Riverside Elementary. It's 2 miles from here." She paused, then added with careful precision, "I can't pay you money, but I'll owe you, however that works." Behind Rook, several other bikers had entered the diner. They'd caught the tail end of the exchange and now stood in a loose semicircle, watching. A woman with red hair pulled into a tight braid, her cut identified her as Vesper, tilted her head with interest. A lean man in his 40s named Flint crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. None of them spoke. They were waiting for Rook's response, following his lead, the way experienced riders followed the road captain through unfamiliar territory. "Why me?" Rook asked. "Why not a teacher or a cop or whoever's supposed to be taking care of you?" Senna's jaw tightened. "Because teachers can't do anything once you leave school property. Because cops need proof, and I don't have any. And because no one's taking care of me, I'm in the system." She said those last 3 words with the matter-of-fact tone of someone stating an unchangeable reality. "I did research. You help veterans. You do charity rides. You have a code about loyalty and keeping promises." "We do," Rook confirmed carefully. "But that doesn't explain why a kid your age is asking bikers to escort her to elementary school at 6 in the morning. What's going on?" This was the moment Senna had rehearsed in her head 100 times during the sleepless night. She could tell the whole truth. The threats, the dead-eyed boy with the knife, the specific details that would make any adult's blood run cold. Or she could keep it vague, protect herself from the vulnerability that came with full disclosure. She chose truth, because if she was going to ask these men for help, they deserved to know exactly what they were walking into. "There are 3 boys who wait for me on my route to school," she said. "They started with insults 3 weeks ago, then pushing, then threats." She kept her voice level, clinical even, as if she were reporting on someone else's life. "Yesterday, the oldest one told me exactly what he's planning to do if I walk past them again. He was very specific, very detailed. And I believe him, because his eyes looked like they'd already done it before." The temperature in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. Vesper's expression hardened into something carved from stone. Flint's arms uncrossed, his hands flexing into fists before deliberately relaxing. A third biker, older, with a grey beard reaching his chest and a patch identifying him as Carver, took a step closer, his jaw working like he was chewing on words too angry to speak. Rook's face revealed nothing, but Senna saw his shoulders shift in a way that spoke of controlled rage being carefully contained. "How old are these boys?" 15 or 16, maybe older. They don't go to my school." "You tell anyone." "The group home counselor said I should avoid confrontation and take a different route." Senna's voice didn't change, but the bitterness leaked through anyway. "There is no different route that doesn't add an hour each way, and I can't be late to school. 3 tardies, and they send a truancy officer." "You tell the police?" "They said without proof or witnesses, there's nothing they can do, and they said kids make up stories sometimes." She paused. "I'm not making this up." "I know you're not," Rook said quietly. Something in his tone made Senna's throat tighten with sudden emotion she hadn't expected. He believed her. This stranger with scars and silver in his beard believed her without question, without hesitation, without asking her to prove anything. Vesper moved to stand beside Rook, her green eyes fierce. "Where exactly do these boys wait?" "Near the old water tower on Riverside Road. It's the only way to school unless you cut through the industrial park, and that adds 40 minutes. "And you're in a group home," Rook confirmed. "No parents, no guardian?" "My grandmother raised me. She died 8 months ago, heart attack." Senna said it the way she'd learned to say it, quick and factual before emotion could grab hold. "The group home is. It's fine. They feed us and give us beds, but there are 17 kids and 2 staff members, and they're doing the best they can. They don't have time to walk anyone to school." Carver spoke for the first time, his voice rough as gravel. "How old are you, kid?" 9. I'll be 10 in March." Something passed between the bikers, a look that needed no words, a communication built on years of riding together and understanding each other's unspoken thoughts. Rook pulled out his phone and typed something quickly, then looked back at Senna. "What's your name?" "Senna Graves." "Senna," Rook repeated, testing it. "Unusual name." "My grandmother liked old movies. Senna was a character in one of her favorites." Rook nodded slowly. Then he made a decision that Senna could see physically settle over him, like armor being locked into place. "Give me 10 minutes. Don't move." He walked outside, phone to his ear, Vesper and Carver following. Through the window, Senna watched them have a conversation with growing intensity, more bikers gathering around as Rook spoke. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw the reactions: shock, anger, grim determination. Rook made 2 more calls, speaking rapidly into the phone while gesturing down the highway. Inside the diner, Flint had stayed behind. He'd positioned himself near Senna without crowding her, a silent presence that felt protective rather than threatening. The waitress brought Senna a hot chocolate she hadn't ordered, setting it down with a gentle smile and a whispered, "On the house, honey." Senna wrapped her hands around the warm mug and waited. She'd made her play. Now she'd see if the world would say yes, or if she'd just made everything infinitely worse. 8 minutes later, Rook came back inside. His expression hadn't softened, but something had shifted in his eyes. A determination that looked like iron, wrapped in purpose. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, crouching down so he was at Senna's eye level. "We're going to walk you to school today, all of us, and we're going to have a conversation with these boys if they show up. A very clear, very direct conversation about consequences." "Okay," Senna whispered. "But that's not all," Rook continued. "I just called every brother we have within 50 miles. Starting tomorrow, you're going to have an escort to school every single day until this is resolved. Not just to school, from school too. And if those boys or anyone else decides they want to test that protection, they're going to discover very quickly that touching a child under our watch is the fastest way to meet the kind of consequences that don't involve police reports or lawyers." Senna's eyes widened. You do that? Every day?" "We have a code, Senna. You researched that, so you know it's true. And part of that code is that we protect our own. As of right now, you're under the protection of the Nevada Hells Angels." He held out his hand. "That's a promise. And we don't break promises." Senna took his hand, her small fingers disappearing into his scarred grip. For the first time in 8 months, since the hospital waiting room where they'd told her grandmother wasn't coming home, she felt something she'd almost forgotten existed: safety. The convoy formed in the diner parking lot as the sun finally cleared the horizon, painting everything in shades of copper and gold. Senna stood beside Rook's motorcycle, a massive black Harley with chrome that gleamed like a mirror, and watched as 30 bikers prepared to escort one 9-year-old girl to elementary school. The absurdity of it should have been laughable. Instead, It felt like witnessing something ancient and powerful sliding into motion, like tectonic plates shifting beneath her feet. Vesper checked the straps on her riding gloves and caught Senna's eye. "You ever ridden on a motorcycle?" Senna shook her head. "Well, you're about to. Rook's bike is the safest one in the club. He's got 28 years without a single accident." She handed Senna a helmet that had been sized for someone much larger, then produced a smaller one from her saddlebag. "This was my niece's. She outgrew it, but I keep it around." "Fits?" Senna pulled it on. It fit perfectly, snug without being uncomfortable. "Why do you keep it around?" Vesper's expression softened for just a moment. "Because you never know when you'll meet a kid who needs a ride." Rook lifted Senna onto the bike's passenger seat with the same careful precision he applied to everything else, gentle but secure, making sure she was positioned correctly before strapping her backpack to the luggage rack. "You're going to hold on to this bar here," he instructed, guiding her hands to the grab rail behind her. "Not me, the bar. If you hold on to me and I need to move quickly, you could throw off my balance, understand?" "Yes. Keep your feet on the passenger pegs at all times, even when we stop. Don't lean unless I lean. Trust the bike and trust me." He settled onto the seat in front of her, the engine rumbling to life with a deep growl that vibrated through Senna's entire body. "Ready?" She nodded, then realized he couldn't see her. "Ready." The convoy pulled out of the parking lot in formation, Rook and Senna in the center, surrounded by a protective diamond of motorcycles that made it impossible for anyone to approach without being noticed. They rode slowly, well below the speed limit, maintaining a steady pace that attracted stares from every window and doorway along the route. People stopped on sidewalks to watch, cars pulled over, phones appeared, recording the unprecedented sight of Hell's Angels escorting a child through town. Senna had expected to feel exposed, vulnerable in her visibility. Instead, she felt the opposite. For the first time in months, she wasn't trying to be invisible. She was being seen, protected, acknowledged, validated. The boys who'd been hunting her would see this too. Everyone would see it. There would be no more ambiguity about whether she mattered, whether anyone would notice if something happened to her. The message was clear and unmistakable. Touch this child, and you'll answer to 30 bikers who don't forget and don't forgive. They reached the section of Riverside Road where the old water tower loomed against the morning sky, its rust-streaked surface casting long shadows across the empty lot. This was where the boys always waited. This was the choke point Senna had learned to dread, the place where safety ended and terror began. The convoy slowed but didn't stop. Rook's head turned slightly, scanning the area with the practiced vigilance of someone who'd been trained to identify threats. Vesper's bike pulled alongside them, and Senna saw her memorizing every detail, the sight lines, the escape routes, the places someone could hide. 3 figures stood near the base of the tower, half hidden in shadow. Even from a distance, Senna recognized them, the tall one with dead eyes, his 2 friends who did whatever he commanded. They were watching the convoy approach with expressions that shifted from confusion to comprehension, to something that might have been fear. The convoy didn't stop, didn't slow down beyond the measured pace they'd maintained the entire route. But as they passed, every single biker turned to look directly at the 3 boys. 30 pairs of eyes, 30 witnesses. 30 living promises that whatever had been happening in this spot was over. The tall boy with dead eyes took a step backward. His friends followed. And in that moment, Senna understood that some battles are won without a single word being spoken. They continued to Riverside Elementary, the convoy pulling into the school's main parking lot just as the first buses began to arrive. Children poured out, stopping mid-step to stare at the impossible sight before them. Teachers emerged from the building, some with concern, others with curiosity. The principal, a stern woman in her 50s named Dr. Helena March, walked down the front steps with an expression that suggested she was very interested in an explanation. Rook parked his bike and helped Senna dismount, then removed his helmet and waited as Dr. March approached. The other bikers had formed a loose perimeter, engines still running, making no move to leave until the situation was resolved. "Can I help you?" Dr. March asked. Her tone was professional, but wary, the voice of someone who dealt with unexpected situations before and learned to stay calm. "Dr. March," Rook said, his voice respectful but firm. "I'm Rook Madsen, Nevada Hells Angels. This is Senna Graves." He gestured to the girl beside him. "She's one of your students. We're here because she's been dealing with a safety issue on her route to school. 3 older boys have been threatening her near the water tower on Riverside Road." Dr. March's attention shifted immediately to Senna, concern replacing wariness. "Senna, is this true?" Senna nodded. "I told Ms. Patterson at the group home. She said to take a different route." "That's not acceptable," Dr. March said flatly. She turned back to Rook. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Starting today, Senna will have an escort to and from school every day until this situation is resolved. We're not asking for permission. We're informing you as a courtesy. Our members will drop her off and pick her up at the designated times. We won't enter school property beyond the parking lot, and we won't interfere with school operations." Dr. March studied him for a long moment. "You understand that having Hell's Angels providing security for a student is unconventional?" "We do. We also understand that a 9-year-old girl being hunted by teenage boys on her way to school is unacceptable." Rook's tone didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. "We're solving a problem that should have been solved by the adults already responsible for her safety. If you'd prefer to provide an alternative solution that guarantees her protection, we'll gladly step aside." The principal glanced at the 30 bikers surrounding them, then back at Senna's face, hopeful, terrified, desperate. She made a decision that Senna could see settling over her, like resolve, crystallizing. "I'll notify the district office and contact the local police to file a formal report about the threats. In the meantime," she looked at Rook directly, "thank you for bringing her safely to school. I assume you'll be here at 3:15 p.m. for pickup?" "Yes, ma'am, every day." "Then I'll see you this afternoon." Dr. March turned to Senna. "Come on, honey, let's get you to class." Senna looked up at Rook, suddenly uncertain. "You'll really come back?" "I promise," Rook said. 3:15 p.m., right here." She wanted to say thank you, wanted to find words big enough to contain the overwhelming gratitude flooding through her chest, but her throat had closed around the emotion, so she just nodded and followed Dr. March toward the school entrance. As she walked away, she heard the engines revving in unison, a deliberate, thunderous reminder that echoed across the parking lot and the surrounding neighborhood. By lunchtime, every student and staff member at Riverside Elementary would know about the girl who'd arrived with 30 bikers. By evening, the entire town would be talking, and 3 boys near a water tower would be wondering if their dead-eyed leader's plans were worth the consequences that had just rolled into town on 30 motorcycles. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The call came to Rook's phone at 1:47 p.m., 3 hours before school dismissal. He was at the clubhouse, a reinforced building on the edge of town that had served as the Nevada chapter's headquarters for 19 years, reviewing security footage from the water tower area that Flint had obtained through channels nobody asked about. The footage showed the 3 boys arriving at their usual spot at 6:15 a.m. every morning for the past 3 weeks, always waiting between 20 and 40 minutes before leaving. Hunting patterns, predatory behavior with the consistency of a planned operation. The caller ID showed a number Rook didn't recognize. He answered anyway. "Yeah. Is this Rook Madsen?" A woman's voice, professional but urgent. "Speaking. Who's this?" "My name is Darcy Brennan. I'm a social worker with Nevada Child Protective Services. I understand you were involved in escorting Senna Graves to school this morning." Rook's jaw tightened. "That's correct. Is there a problem?" "Not the kind you might think. Dr. March called me after your visit. She's one of the better principals about reporting concerns. I pulled Senna's file and—" A pause, the sound of papers rustling. "I need to meet with you, today if possible. This situation is more complicated than it appears." "How much more complicated?" "The kind where a 9-year-old's safety concerns weren't taken seriously because no one bothered to look at the bigger picture. Can you meet me at the Riverside Diner in 30 minutes? Rook checked the time. 1 hour. "I need to bring someone with me." "Who?" "Our club's secretary. She's better at remembering legal details than I am." "Fine. 1 hour. I'll be the woman drinking too much coffee and looking stressed." The call ended. Rook stood and walked through the clubhouse to the main room, where Vesper was reviewing a list of members who'd volunteered for escort duty. Carver and Flint sat at the bar, discussing logistics. 3 other members, Sterling, a former Marine with a prosthetic leg, Ash, a mechanic who could fix anything with an engine, and a woman named Quinn who handled the club's charitable operations, were coordinating schedules. "Got a call from CPS," Rook announced. "Social worker wants to meet. Says Senna's situation is more complicated than we know." Vesper looked up sharply. "Complicated how?" "Didn't say, but she sounded like someone who'd found something that made her angry." He gestured to the door. "You're coming with me. Rest of you, keep working on the schedule. We need coverage for 2 runs daily, morning and afternoon, 7 days a week until further notice." "We've got 43 volunteers so far," Quinn reported. "Brothers from the Henderson and Las Vegas chapters heard about it and want in. We could probably field 100 riders if needed." "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," Rook said, but his tone suggested he was prepared if it did. Darcy Brennan was exactly as she described herself. A woman in her mid-40s with dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail, drinking what appeared to be her 3rd cup of coffee based on the empty mugs at her table. She wore professional clothing that had seen better days and carried the exhausted expression of someone fighting a system with insufficient resources and too many broken children slipping through cracks. She stood when Rook and Vesper entered, shaking their hands with a grip that spoke of determination rather than friendliness. "Thank you for meeting me. I know this is unusual." "Everything about today has been unusual," Rook said, sliding into the booth across from her. Vesper sat beside him, pulling out a small notebook she always carried for club business. "What did you find?" Darcy opened a folder thick with documents. "First, I need to confirm something. You're providing security escort for Senna Graves, correct? And you're planning to continue this daily?" "That's right. For how long?" "As long as necessary." Darcy studied him for a moment, then nodded as if he'd passed some internal test. "Good, because after reviewing her case file and making 3 phone calls that should have been made months ago, I've concluded that Senna Graves is one of the most overlooked children in our system, and that's saying something." She pulled out a document and slid it across the table. Senna's grandmother, Eleanor Graves, died 8 months ago. Heart attack, sudden and unexpected. Elena had been Senna's sole guardian since birth. Parents weren't in the picture. Both had issues with addiction and signed away parental rights when Senna was 3 months old. Elena raised her alone, worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat, and by all accounts was a devoted, loving guardian. "We know this part," Vesper said gently. "What are we missing?" "What you're missing is that Elena Graves had been trying to arrange alternative guardianship for 6 months before she died. She knew her heart was failing. She'd been diagnosed with cardiomyopathy 2 years earlier. She wanted to ensure Senna would be protected if something happened. Darcy pulled out another document. She filed paperwork requesting guardianship review and had identified 3 potential candidates: a former co-worker, a church friend, and a retired teacher who'd mentored Senna. All 3 expressed willingness to be evaluated for guardianship. Rook leaned forward. "So what happened?" "Bureaucratic failure," Darcy said flatly. "The paperwork got lost in processing. When Elena died and Senna entered the system, no one bothered to check if there were pending guardianship arrangements. She was placed in the group home as a temporary measure that became indefinite because her caseworker has 63 active cases and not enough hours in a day to properly handle any of them." "Who's her caseworker?" Vesper asked, already writing notes. "Someone who's been with CPS for 3 months and is overwhelmed to the point of ineffectiveness. Not her fault. The system is broken." Darcy's voice carried the weight of someone who'd been saying these words for years. "But here's where it gets worse. I made calls to those 3 potential guardians Elena identified. All 3 are still willing. All 3 asked why no one ever contacted them." Rook felt something cold settle in his chest. "You're saying Senna could have been placed with a proper guardian months ago?" "Exactly. Instead, she's been living in an overcrowded group home where no one has time to notice that a 9-year-old is being stalked on her way to school." Darcy's hands clenched around her coffee mug, and when she tried to report it, the response was, "Take a different route, because addressing the actual problem would require time and resources no one has." "What about the boys threatening her?" Vesper asked. "Did you find anything about them?" Darcy's expression darkened. "That's the part that made me call you immediately. I reached out to local police and requested incident reports for the area around the water tower. Nothing recent, but—" She pulled out a printed police report. 2 years ago, there was an incident involving teenage boys and an assault on a homeless veteran near that same location. The case was dropped due to insufficient evidence and the victim leaving the area. The description of the primary suspect matches what Senna described: tall, dead eyes, history of escalating behavior. "So he's done this before," Rook said quietly. "Almost certainly. And he'll do it again if he's not stopped." Darcy closed the folder. "Which brings me to why I wanted to meet with you. What you did this morning, bringing 30 bikers to escort a child to school, was the first time in 8 months that anyone has actually protected Senna instead of managing her as a case file. It was also the most visible, undeniable message that could be sent to whoever is threatening her. We plan to continue," Rook confirmed. "I'm not here to stop you. I'm here to help coordinate." Darcy pulled out a business card and a single-page document. "This is official authorization from CPS acknowledging that Senna Graves has expressed safety concerns and that community support has been arranged to address those concerns. It's not perfect legal coverage, but it's something. If anyone questions why Hell's Angels are providing school escort, show them this." Vesper took the document and studied it. "This doesn't give us any actual authority. No, but it acknowledges the arrangement exists and that CPS is aware. It's the bureaucratic equivalent of saying, we can't do our job, so we're grateful someone is." Darcy's voice carried bitter resignation. "I'm also fast-tracking review of those 3 potential guardians. If any of them check out, Senna could be placed in a proper home within 2 to 3 weeks." "What about the boys at the water tower?" Rook asked. "Police are opening a formal investigation based on Senna's report and your witness statement from this morning. But realistically, unless they make a direct move that can be documented, there's limited legal recourse." She looked directly at Rook. "Which is why your presence matters. You're preventing the crime before it happens." Rook nodded slowly. "Understood. We'll maintain daily escort indefinitely." Thank you. Darcy stood, gathering her materials. I know the Hells Angels have a complicated reputation, but today you're protecting a child that the system failed. That matters more than any reputation. After she left, Vesper turned to Rook. 43 volunteers and counting. We can handle this. It's not about handling it, Rook said. It's about making sure that 9-year-old girl never has to stand outside a diner at dawn begging strangers for protection again. He pulled out his phone. Call everyone. I want a meeting tonight. We're not just providing escort. We're going to find out everything there is to know about those 3 boys and make sure they understand that touching Senna Graves isn't just dangerous. It's impossible. By the time Rook pulled his motorcycle into Riverside Elementary's parking lot at 3:12 p.m., word had spread across every corner of the Nevada Hells Angels network like wildfire through dry brush. The group text thread had exploded with over 200 messages, offers of support, requests for shift assignments, and more than a few promises to handle the situation in ways that Rook had to explicitly forbid. They were bikers, not vigilantes. The line mattered, even when the law failed to protect those who needed it most. Today's pickup detail consisted of 12 motorcycles, a smaller number than the morning run, but deliberately chosen. Rook had selected members with specific skills. Vesper for her sharp instincts and ability to read situations, Carver for his intimidating presence and decades of experience, and Sterling for his background in military reconnaissance. The others were veterans of both the road and life's harder lessons, people who understood that protecting a child meant more than just showing up. They arrived in formation, engines creating a symphony of controlled power that drew immediate attention from departing students and waiting parents. Rook parked in the same spot as the morning drop-off, removed his helmet and waited. The message was the same as before: consistency, visibility, protection. Dr. March emerged from the building at exactly 3:15 p.m., Senna walking beside her. The principal spoke briefly to Senna, then approached Rook with a measured expression. Mr. Madsen. Dr. March. I received a call from Child Protective Services this afternoon. They informed me of your arrangement. She paused. I also received 3 calls from concerned parents asking why Hells Angels are providing security for a student. And what did you tell them? Rook asked. I told them that a child under my care was being threatened and that community members stepped forward to ensure her safety when other systems failed to respond adequately. Dr. March's voice carried the crisp authority of someone who defended difficult decisions before. I also told them that if they had concerns about student safety, they were welcome to volunteer for the newly formed Parent Safety Patrol I'm establishing. Rook's eyebrows rose slightly. Parent Safety Patrol? As of tomorrow morning, we'll have parent volunteers monitoring key routes to school. I've already had 17 parents sign up. Apparently seeing 30 motorcycles escorting a child made several people realize they should be doing more to protect all our students. A faint smile crossed her face. So thank you for the wake-up call. Glad we could help. Dr. March's expression sobered. That said, I need to inform you of something. 3 teenage boys were seen loitering near school property this afternoon, around 2:30 p.m. They left before we could approach them, but the description matches what Senna provided. Campus security is now aware and will be monitoring for any future appearances. Rook's jaw tightened. They know where she goes to school. They probably always knew. Now they're testing boundaries. Dr. March looked back at Senna, who stood 30 feet away, speaking quietly with another student. She's a remarkable child, Mr. Madsen. Tough, resilient, smarter than most adults give her credit for, but she's also 9 years old and carrying trauma that no child should bear. Whatever you're doing, please continue. She needs stability right now more than anything. We will. Rook gestured to Vesper, who approached with Senna's helmet. "Every day, until this is resolved." Senna walked over, her backpack hanging from both shoulders now, instead of clutched defensively against her chest. Small progress, but progress nonetheless. "Hi." "Hey," Rook said. "How was school?" "Different." She accepted the helmet from Vesper and pulled it on with more confidence than the morning. Everyone kept asking about the bikers. Some kids thought it was cool. Some kids thought I was in trouble. "What did you tell them?" "I told them I have friends who keep promises." She climbed onto the motorcycle with help from Vesper, settling into position and gripping the grab bar without needing instruction. Fast learner. Rook started the engine. "Ready to head home?" "Yeah, but—" She hesitated. "Can we go past the water tower?" Every biker within earshot tensed. Vesper moved closer, her expression concerned. "Why do you want to go there?" "Because they need to see that I'm not afraid anymore," Senna said simply. "They spent 3 weeks making me terrified. I want them to see that their power is gone." Rook twisted in his seat to look back at her. "That's brave, also potentially dangerous. You understand that?" "I understand, but I also understand that hiding just makes them think they won." Her brown eyes met his steadily. "My grandmother used to say that bullies only win when you let them control where you go and who you become. I'm done letting them control anything." Something in those words reminded Rook of decisions he'd made decades ago, the moment when fear transforms into determination, when running stops being an option and standing ground becomes the only choice. He'd been 18, not 9, but the principle remained the same. He looked at Vesper, who nodded slightly, then at Carver, who revved his engine in agreement. "All right," Rook said. "We'll ride past the water tower, but we stay in formation. We don't stop, and if anything feels wrong, we get you out of there immediately. Deal?" "Deal." The convoy reformed, this time with Senna's bike positioned in the absolute center, protected from all angles by layers of chrome and leather and decades of road experience. They pulled out of the school parking lot and headed toward Riverside Road, maintaining the same measured pace as before. Word of their route must have spread, because by the time they reached the water tower section, a small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk. Local residents, some curious, some supportive, a few openly hostile. Rook spotted at least 3 people recording on their phones. Good, let them record. Let everyone see that Senna Graves wasn't disappearing quietly. The 3 boys were there, standing in the exact same spot as the morning, but now in full daylight with nowhere to hide in shadow. The tall one with dead eyes stood in front, his 2 friends flanking him in a formation that mimicked threat. But something had changed in their posture. The casual confidence was gone, replaced by tension and calculation. They'd underestimated the situation this morning. They wouldn't make that mistake twice. As the convoy approached, Rook kept his attention split, half on the road, half on the boys. He saw the moment the tall one spotted Senna on the back of his bike, saw the flash of anger cross his face, followed quickly by forced indifference. Trying to look unbothered, trying to maintain the illusion of power. It didn't work, because 12 motorcycles surrounded that one small girl, and every single rider was looking directly at him with expressions that promised consequences for even thinking about touching her. The convoy passed without stopping, engines rumbling their message into the afternoon air. Senna didn't look back. She sat straight and still, facing forward, every inch of her small frame radiating the kind of courage that most adults never find. They continued to the group home on Miller Street, a 2-story house with peeling paint and a yard full of toys in various states of disrepair. Rook pulled into the driveway, where a harried-looking woman in her 30s stood on the porch with a phone in her hand and concern written across her face. "You must be Ms. Patterson," Rook said, helping Senna dismount. "I am. And you're—" She trailed off, taking in the dozen bikers now parked in her driveway. Rook Madsen, we spoke with Child Protective Services today about Senna's safety concerns. This is her daily escort arrangement until the situation is resolved. Miss Patterson looked at Senna, who was removing her helmet and avoiding eye contact. Senna, honey, are you okay? I'm fine, Miss Patterson. They're helping me. I can see that. She turned back to Rook. I should apologize. When Senna told me about the boys, I didn't. I should have taken it more seriously. We're just so overwhelmed here and I didn't realize. We're not here to assign blame, Rook said quietly. We're here to solve the problem. Starting tomorrow, we'll pick Senna up at 6:30 a.m. and return her by 3:45 p.m. We have CPS authorization documentation if you need to see it. No, that's fine. Thank you. Truly. Ms. Patterson's eyes were bright with emotion. Thank you for doing what I should have done. Senna retrieved her backpack and walked toward the house, then paused and turned back. Rook? Yeah? Tomorrow morning, will it be you again, or someone different? It'll be me. Same time, same bike. Every day this week, then we'll rotate schedule so you can meet the other members who'll be part of your escort detail. He held her gaze. But there will always be someone here. That's the promise. She nodded, something like relief washing across her face, then disappeared into the house. Miss Patterson followed, casting one more grateful glance back before closing the door. The bikers regrouped in the driveway. Sterling spoke first, his voice carrying the flat assessment of someone who'd evaluated threats professionally. Those boys at the water tower aren't backing down. They're regrouping. I know, Rook said, and they're going to escalate, Vesper added. We embarrassed them publicly. People like that don't handle embarrassment well. I know that too. So what's the plan? Carver asked. Rook looked down the street toward where Riverside Road cut through the older section of town. The plan is, we do exactly what we said we'd do. We show up every day, we stay visible, we document everything. And we make sure that every person in this town understands that Senna Graves has a family now. One that doesn't break promises and doesn't disappear when things get hard. And when they make their move, Sterling pressed, because they will. Then we'll be there, Rook said simply, and they'll learn that some mistakes only get made once. The test came on day 4, though Rook had expected it sooner. 3 days of flawless escorts had passed. Morning pickups at 6:30 a.m., afternoon returns at 3:45 p.m. Each run documented with notes, photos, and careful attention to any changes in pattern. The boys at the water tower had appeared twice more, always watching, never approaching, calculating, planning. Rook had learned long ago that predators had patterns. They tested boundaries before attacking, probed for weaknesses, waited for the moment when attention slipped and protection faltered. The question wasn't if they'd make a move, it was when and how. The answer came on Thursday at 6:17 a.m. Rook arrived at the group home to find Miss Patterson standing on the porch with her phone pressed to her ear and fear etched across her face. Senna wasn't visible. Neither were any of the other children who normally wandered the yard before school started. He killed the engine and dismounted, Vesper and Carver following suit. What happened? Miss Patterson lowered her phone. Senna's missing. She was supposed to be ready at 6:15, but when I went to call her down, she wasn't in her room. None of the other kids saw her leave. Her backpack is gone, but her jacket is still hanging by the door. Her voice cracked. She left without telling anyone. Rook's blood went cold. How long has she been missing? I checked her room at 6:05, so maybe 15-20 minutes maximum. She wouldn't run, Vesper said immediately, not after everything we've done to protect her. Unless she was trying to protect us, Rook said quietly, the realization settling like ice in his chest. Where's her phone? She doesn't have one. We can't afford individual phones for all the kids. Damn it. Rook pulled out his own phone and began typing rapidly. Carver, call every member on escort duty and tell them to mobilize immediately. Vesper, contact Dr. March and make sure school security knows Senna might be in danger. Sterling. He looked up to see the former Marine already had his phone out. Call local PD and report a missing child. Use the CPS authorization to speed up response. On it, Sterling confirmed. Rook turned back to Ms. Patterson. Think carefully. Did Senna say anything yesterday afternoon? Any indication she was planning something? Ms. Patterson's face went pale. She asked me if people ever got hurt protecting her. I told her that good people sometimes take risks for those they care about, but that didn't mean she should feel guilty. She just nodded and went quiet. She thinks someone's going to get hurt because of her, Vesper said. She's trying to remove herself from the equation. By doing what? Carver demanded. Where would a 9-year-old go at 6 in the morning? Rook's mind raced through possibilities, discarding options as quickly as they formed. Senna was smart, resourceful, and traumatized, a dangerous combination that could lead to desperate decisions. She wouldn't run away completely. That wasn't her pattern. She wouldn't go to the police. She'd already tried that route and been dismissed. She wouldn't hide in random locations. She knew that would just delay the inevitable confrontation. So where would she go? The answer hit him like physical impact. The water tower. She's going to confront them herself. That's suicide, Carver said flatly. That's a scared 9-year-old who doesn't want anyone else getting hurt because of her. Rook was already moving toward his bike. She thinks if she faces them alone, they'll leave everyone else alone. She's trying to trade herself for our safety. Except they won't leave her alone, Vesper said, climbing onto her own motorcycle. I know what they'll do. Rook's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. Which is why we're going to get there first. Carver, contact every member within 10 miles and tell them to converge on the water tower. Sterling, stay here in case she comes back. Ms. Patterson, if she shows up or contacts you, call me immediately. He didn't wait for confirmation. The engine roared to life and he was moving. Vesper beside him, both of them pushing speed limits as they raced toward Riverside Road. His phone buzzed with incoming messages, members responding to the alert, offering assistance, asking for details. He ignored them all, focusing on the road and the terrible calculation in his head. If Senna had left at 6:05, she'd have a 12-minute head start. The walk to the water tower was approximately 20 minutes at adult pace, maybe 25 for a child. That meant she'd arrive around 6:30, assuming she didn't run. The boys typically showed up between 6:15 and 6:45, their timing inconsistent enough to suggest they weren't bound by schedules. Too many variables, too many ways this could go catastrophically wrong. They reached the water tower section at 6:24 a.m. The sun was just clearing the horizon, painting everything in shades of amber and shadow, and there, 50 yards ahead, Rook saw her. Senna stood near the base of the water tower, small and alone in the empty lot. Her backpack sat at her feet. She wasn't crying, wasn't moving, just standing there with her arms at her sides, waiting like someone who'd made peace with an inevitable outcome. And 20 feet away, 3 teenage boys were approaching. Rook accelerated, Vesper matching his speed. The boys turned at the sound of engines, confusion flashing across their faces. They'd expected a lone child. They'd gotten something else entirely. The motorcycles roared into the lot. Gravel spraying as Rook and Vesper positioned themselves between Senna and the boys. Rook was off his bike before it finished stopping, moving with the controlled urgency of someone who'd been in crisis situations before. "Senna, get behind me, now!" She didn't move, just looked at him with eyes full of guilt and determination. "You weren't supposed to find me." "Too bad I did. Now get behind me. I can't let anyone get hurt because of me. Then stop making stupid decisions that force us to protect you from yourself. Rook's voice came out harsher than intended, but fear had stripped away his careful control. You think disappearing solves anything? You think facing them alone makes you brave? All it does is put you in danger and break every promise we made to keep you safe. But you shouldn't have to. We choose to. Vesper had dismounted and now stood beside Rook, her expression fierce. That's what you're not understanding, Senna. This isn't obligation. It's choice. We're here because we want to be. Because protecting you matters. Because some promises are worth keeping. The tall boy, with dead eyes, had recovered from his surprise and now watched the confrontation with calculating interest. Having a lover's quarrel? Or is this a family thing? Neither, Rook said, turning his full attention to the tall boy. This is about you understanding that your window of opportunity just closed permanently. The boy smirked. Big words from someone who won't be here every second of every day. You're right, I won't be. Rook took a step forward. But someone will. And the moment you touch her, you'll discover that there are 57 bikers in this network who take threats against children very personally. You'll also discover that your name is Marcus Keller. You're 17. You have 2 prior incidents on your juvenile record that were sealed, and your father is a lawyer who's very good at making problems disappear. Marcus's smirk faltered. You can't. We already did. We know who you are. We know where you live. We know your patterns, your friends, and every move you've made for the past 3 weeks. Rook's voice dropped to something cold and absolute. So here's what happens next. You walk away right now and never come near this girl again. Or you test us and learn very quickly that legal protection only works when witnesses are willing to stay silent. And I promise you, every single member of this club is an excellent witness. The standoff lasted 7 seconds. Then Marcus turned and walked away, his friends following. Not running, not making threats, just leaving, because even dead-eyed teenage predators understood when they'd been outmatched. Rook turned back to Senna, who was staring at the ground. Get on the bike. I'm sorry. Save it for later. Right now, you're late for school. They rode in silence, Senna's arms wrapped tight around the grab bar. When they reached Riverside Elementary, Rook walked her directly to Dr. March's office and explained what had happened. The principal's expression shifted from concern to determination. I'll be filing a formal restraining order request today, Dr. March said. Marcus Keller has a documented history, and with your testimony, we have grounds. Rook nodded. Good. We'll maintain escort regardless. After Senna went to class, Vesper pulled Rook aside. She tried to sacrifice herself to protect us. I know. That kind of thinking doesn't go away overnight. She's going to need more than just physical protection. I know that too. Rook watched through the window as Senna disappeared into the building, which is why we're not going anywhere. If this story moved you, consider leaving a like. It helps us share these northern confessions with others who need to hear them. Stories of courage deserve to be seen. Within 48 hours, Senna's situation had become something larger than anyone anticipated. The story spread through biker networks across 3 states, not through news coverage, but through the old channels of brotherhood and shared purpose. By Saturday morning, Rook's phone contained offers from chapters in Arizona, California, and Utah. Veterans organizations reached out. A retired federal judge named Catherine Wells called personally, offering pro bono legal assistance. The escort schedule evolved into a sophisticated operation. Morning shifts rotated between 12 core members, each bringing different skills. Vesper handled coordination and maintained detailed logs. Carver managed background security, ensuring the routes stayed monitored. Sterling trained newer members on defensive positioning and threat assessment, but the real change came from unexpected sources. Dr. March's Parent Safety Patrol expanded to 40 volunteers covering 6 different routes. Local businesses began posting signs in their windows, "Safe Haven, Children Welcome." Even the diner where Senna had first approached Rook designated itself an official checkpoint, with staff trained to recognize and respond to children in distress. Senna adapted to her new reality with remarkable resilience. She learned the names of every escort member, memorized their schedules, and began asking questions about their lives. Rook discovered she had an exceptional memory for details and a curiosity that had been suppressed by survival instincts. She asked Vesper about motorcycle mechanics. She asked Carver about his military service. She asked Sterling about his prosthetic leg with the directness of someone who understood that scars were nothing to hide. On the 8th day, something shifted. Senna arrived at morning pickup carrying 2 extra granola bars. "For you and Vesper," she explained, "in case you get hungry on the ride." Small gesture, massive significance. She was no longer just receiving protection, she was beginning to reciprocate care. Darcy Brennan called on day 10 with news about the guardianship review. 2 candidates remained viable. Margaret Chen, the retired teacher who'd mentored Senna in 2nd grade, and Father Dominic Walsh, who ran the church Eleanor Graves had attended. Both had completed home studies. Both wanted to proceed. "Senna needs to meet them and express preference," Darcy explained. "We can arrange supervised visits starting next week." "Will the escort arrangement continue if she's placed?" Rook asked. "That's between you and her future guardian. But I suspect whoever takes her will be grateful for the established security network." That evening, Rook met with Margaret Chen at her home, a modest house with a garden and photographs of former students covering every available surface. She was in her mid-60s, sharp-eyed and direct. "I remember Senna," Margaret said. "Brilliant child, reads 3 grades above her level. Elena was so proud." She paused. "I need you to understand something, Mr. Madsen. If I'm approved as Senna's guardian, I'm not taking over her protection, I'm joining it. What you've done for her is extraordinary, and I want that support system to continue. You're not concerned about bikers being involved in her life." Margaret smiled. "My late husband was a Marine. I understand brotherhood and loyalty better than most. Senna needs family, Mr. Madsen. Family comes in many forms." The meeting with Father Walsh went similarly. He was younger than Rook expected, early 50s, with the calm presence of someone who'd counseled through countless crises. He'd known Elena Graves for 8 years and remembered Senna as the little girl who asked impossible theological questions during Sunday school. "She challenged me more than most seminary students," he said with warmth. "Asked why God allowed suffering if he loved everyone. Wanted to know if promises counted, if the person you made them to forgot they existed." His expression sobered. "Elena worried about what would happen to her, made me promise to watch over Senna if anything happened. I failed that promise when she entered the system. I'd like the chance to keep it now." 2 good options, both genuine, both capable of providing the stable home Senna desperately needed. The question was, what did Senna want? The supervised visits happened at a neutral location, the community center conference room, with Darcy Brennan present and Rook waiting outside at Senna's request. Margaret Chen came first, bringing photo albums from Senna's 2nd grade year and a book of poetry Elena had apparently loved. They spent 90 minutes together. Through the door, Rook heard quiet conversation punctuated by occasional laughter. When Senna emerged, her eyes were red, but her expression was thoughtful rather than upset. "She remembered things I forgot," Senna said, "about my grandmother, about me before. Everything." Father Walsh's visit 2 days later was different, more serious, more focused on the practical realities of guardianship. He explained his schedule, the church community, the school district. He was honest about challenges and clear about expectations. Afterward, Senna sat in silence for a long time before speaking. They both care. They both mean it. Yes, Rook confirmed. So, how do I choose? What does your instinct say? Senna looked at him with those steady brown eyes that had first caught his attention in the diner. My instinct says I want to live with someone who keeps promises, who understands that family isn't just blood, who won't disappear when things get hard. She paused. Like you. Something in Rook's chest tightened. Senna, I can't. I know. You're not applying for guardianship. I'm not asking you to. She took a breath. But Margaret and Father Walsh both reminded me of my grandmother in different ways. Margaret remembers who I was. Father Walsh wants to help me figure out who I'll become. I think Margaret feels like home. Darcy arranged the placement for the following week. Margaret's home study passed final review. Legal paperwork processed with unusual speed, possibly because a retired federal judge was making pointed phone calls about bureaucratic delays. On Senna's last night at the group home, the escort team threw an impromptu celebration at the clubhouse. Nothing elaborate. Pizza, soda, and a cake Vesper had ordered with "Family Chosen" written in icing. 17 bikers showed up, along with Dr. March, Darcy Brennan, and Margaret Chen. Senna stood in the center of the room, surrounded by leather and chrome, and people who'd chosen to protect her, and for the first time in months, she looked like a child instead of a survivor. I want to say something, she announced suddenly. The room quieted. I know I'm just a kid, and I know what happened to me isn't special compared to what some people go through. But you all showed up anyway. You kept your promises even when it was inconvenient. You made me feel like I mattered. Her voice wavered slightly. My grandmother used to say that angels come in unexpected forms. I think she was right. Carver cleared his throat roughly. Vesper wiped her eyes. Even Rook felt emotion pressing against his carefully maintained control. We're not angels, he said. We're just people who believe some things are worth fighting for. That's what makes you angels, Senna replied simply. The placement happened on a Saturday. Rook and Vesper helped move Senna's few belongings to Margaret's house, a 5-minute drive that marked the transition from temporary survival to permanent home. Margaret had prepared a bedroom with care, fresh paint, new bedding, and a bookshelf already filled with age-appropriate titles, and several challenging ones for when Senna was ready. The escort continues, Rook told Margaret, until we're certain the threat is completely resolved. I was hoping you'd say that, Margaret replied, but I want you to know you're welcome here any time, not just for security, for family. Marcus Keller and his friends had disappeared from the water tower area entirely. Rumor suggested Marcus's father had sent him to a private military school in another state after learning the full extent of his son's activities. The other 2 boys had been seen once, quickly leaving when they spotted escort motorcycles. The threat had evaporated, dissolved by visibility and determination and the simple fact that predators preferred easy prey. But the escort continued anyway, because promises mattered, because Senna deserved consistency, because family didn't abandon people just because the immediate danger had passed. 3 months later, Rook pulled into Margaret Chen's driveway for afternoon pickup and found Senna waiting on the front porch with her backpack and something else, a folder thick with papers. "What's this?" he asked as she climbed onto the bike. "My school project. We had to write about someone who changed our life." She secured her helmet. "I wrote about you." They rode to the clubhouse where Vesper was coordinating a charity ride for veteran housing. Senna had become a regular presence there, helping with administrative tasks and asking endless questions about motorcycle maintenance. The members had adapted seamlessly, treating her with the same rough affection they'd show a younger sister. Inside, Senna opened her folder and began reading aloud. The essay detailed her story with surprising clarity. The fear, the desperate request, the escort that became something more. But it focused primarily on what the experience taught her about courage, loyalty, and the nature of family. Heroes don't always look like what we expect, she read. Sometimes they wear leather and ride motorcycles. Sometimes they're strangers who become family because they choose to show up when everyone else is too busy or too scared. My hero kept a promise to a 9-year-old girl nobody else noticed. That promise changed everything. The room was silent when she finished. Then Carver started clapping, followed by Vesper, then everyone present. Senna's face flushed with embarrassment and pride. "A plus?" Rook asked. "A plus," she confirmed. That evening, as Rook prepared to ride home, Margaret approached with news. The restraining order against Marcus Keller was approved indefinitely. Between your documentation and the police investigation, the judge had more than enough evidence. Marcus won't be coming near Senna or this area again. Good. There's something else. Margaret hesitated. Senna asked if she could get a motorcycle license when she turned 16. She says she wants to ride with the escort team someday, as a member, not just someone being protected. Rook felt something like pride mixed with amusement. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that decision is years away, and we'd discuss it when appropriate, but between you and me." Margaret smiled. "I think she'd make an excellent rider. She's got the courage and the determination, and she understands what it means to be part of something bigger than herself." 7 years passed. Senna grew from a frightened 9-year-old into a confident teenager who excelled academically while maintaining close ties to the biker community that had protected her. She volunteered at the clubhouse, helped coordinate charity rides, and spoke at veterans' events about the importance of chosen family. On her 16th birthday, Rook gave her a helmet, not the borrowed one from Vesper, but a custom piece with her name and the Nevada Hells Angels logo. "For when you're ready," he said. She earned her motorcycle license 4 months later. Her first solo ride was from Margaret's house to the clubhouse, with Rook and Vesper flanking her as escorts, not because she needed protection anymore, but because some traditions mattered. At 17, Senna started a non-profit focused on connecting at-risk children with community protection networks. She used her story as the foundation, speaking at schools and youth centers about the importance of asking for help and the reality that heroes exist in unexpected places. At 18, she was accepted to university with a full scholarship. Her essay topic, "The Promise Keepers: How Community Protection Networks Save Lives." The night before she left for college, the escort team gathered at the clubhouse for a final ride. 53 motorcycles, the original members plus new recruits inspired by Senna's story. They rode through town at sunset, engines thundering like distant storms, chrome catching the dying light. They passed the old water tower where everything had changed 9 years earlier. The lot was different now, cleaned up, repurposed as a community park with a playground and benches. A small plaque near the entrance read, "Dedicated to Elena Graves and all those who protect the vulnerable." Senna stopped her bike there, removed her helmet, and stood looking at the plaque. Rook pulled up beside her. "You thinking about that morning?" And he asked. "I'm thinking about how terrified I was, how desperate, how certain I was that no one would help." She turned to him. "And then someone did. You asked for help. That took courage. You said yes, that took something more." She smiled. "My grandmother was right. Angels come in unexpected forms. Sometimes they wear leather and ride Harleys. Sometimes they're exactly where you need them to be, even when you don't know you're looking. Your grandmother would be proud of you. She'd be proud of all of us." Senna looked at the assembled riders, Vesper and Carver, Sterling and Ash, Quinn and Flint, and dozens more who'd joined the network over the years. We built something, didn't we? More than just protecting one kid. We proved that community matters, that promises count, that family isn't defined by blood, but by who shows up when the world says no. We did, Rook confirmed, and you're taking that lesson with you, spreading it to others who need to hear it. They rode back to the clubhouse as stars emerged overhead. At the entrance, Margaret waited with cake and coffee, surrounded by people who'd become family through choice and circumstance. The celebration lasted until midnight. Stories exchanged, promises renewed, connections strengthened. Before leaving, Senna approached Rook one final time. Thank you for everything, for believing a desperate 9-year-old, for keeping your promise, for showing me what family really means. Thank you for asking, Rook replied. You reminded us why this matters, why we ride, why we show up when others won't. She hugged him, quick and fierce, then climbed onto her motorcycle and disappeared into the night, heading toward whatever future waited. But she carried with her something unchangeable, the knowledge that she was never alone, that promises mattered, and that family existed wherever people chose to protect and support each other. The escort network continued long after Senna left for university. It expanded to other towns, inspired similar programs across state lines, and became proof that ordinary people could create extraordinary change through simple acts of showing up and keeping their word. And in a diner on Route 19, where a frightened child had once asked strangers for help, a new plaque hung beside the cash register, "Please walk me to school," in memory of the request that changed everything. The request that proved courage comes in many forms. The request that reminded everyone that heroes are made, not born. The request that showed the world what happens when someone finally says yes. Thank you for listening to this Northern Confession. If these stories of loyalty, courage, and chosen family moved you, please subscribe to our channel. We share new tales every week, real accounts from the forgotten roads of America, where ordinary people become heroes and promises are kept no matter the cost. Leave a comment telling us where you're from and what this story meant to you. These confessions travel far, carried by people who believe that honor still matters in a complicated world.